Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Edward Griffin. I'm a member of the John Birch Society, and it's my pleasure to be able to serve as your host in this introductory presentation. We are well aware that many Americans have strange and sometimes exaggerated ideas of what our society is and what we as members do. And so the purpose of this presentation is simply to set the record straight and clear up as much of the confusion as possible. To do this, we'll not waste valuable time trying to answer all of the many charges and accusations. Instead, we'll be more positive in the telling of our story. Rather than refuting what is untrue about the John Birch Society, we'll attempt to show what is true. We'll explain what the society is, why it was founded, what it does, and how it functions. And if we succeed in answering these questions, then you'll be able to see and judge for yourself what the society is not. A good place to begin our story is with this book, The Life of John Birch. Written by Robert Welch in 1954, over 4 years before the founding of the John Birch Society, this volume reveals the inspiring true story of one of the finest young men this country has ever produced. It's also a fascinating story, not only of the tragic era in which he lived, but of the ideals for which he was willing to die. In those two elements, the life and death of John Birch, one can find the key to an understanding of the society which now bears his name. And so, to help create that understanding, let's take a closer look at this young man and at the events which eventually led to his name being known to almost every literate person on the face of the earth.
This is that vast region of China that lies between two great rivers, the Yangtze and Wangho. It was here on the Lunghai Railway that the final scenes of a most extraordinary story were enacted. The citizens of Suzhou memorialized the event by creating a park on a hill overlooking the town. Here, beneath a marker bearing the inscription, "He died for righteousness," lie the remains of the first American casualty of World War III, Captain John Morrison Birch. Yes, this is China, north of the Yangtze, south of the Wangho. This is also Asia, west of the Yellow Sea, east of Tibet, and halfway around the world from America. American though he was, John Birch's life ended where it began. For as Asia was the place of his death, so also was Asia the place of his birth. At the foot of the Himalayas, at the headwaters of the Ganges, in Landour, India, John Birch was born to missionary parents on May 28, 1918. Displaying at an early age the alertness of mind and zest for living, for which he would be remembered in later years, John was receptive to the serene spirit of his Islamic nurse and the stoic influence of the Indian people. A full share of love and happy family life gave him a personal security and inner strength that was to sustain him through many hard hours in years to come. Back in the United States, John Birch and his brothers and sister, direct descendants of John Alden, are as American as Calvin Coolidge and Buffalo Bill Cody, to both of whom they are directly related. As a Boy Scout, John learns outdoor skills and develops a self-reliance that will later help him endure the hard life of a coolie in far-off China. Studious and quick to learn, independent and resourceful, he graduates from high school at the head of his class. Mercer University in Macon, Georgia, is where John decides to be a missionary to China. He He graduates from Mercer in 1939 with his Bachelor of Arts degree, magna cum laude. Enrolling in the Bible Baptist Seminary in Fort Worth, Texas, John completes 2 years' work in 1 year and still graduates at the head of his class. He leaves for China almost immediately. When John arrives in Shanghai during the summer of 1940, China has been at war with Japan for 2.5 years. He stays in Shanghai for the first 6 months. Attending a language school, he picks up the local dialect in record time. In fact, by early 1941, he masters the difficult native language well enough to be sent to Hangzhou, where he teaches at a Chinese school for boys, conducts religious services, and works with Chinese ministers in many small churches throughout a wide area. His routine missionary trips back and forth through enemy lines are not viewed kindly by the Japanese. On the very first day of war with the United States, December 7, 1941, the Japanese forces in China send soldiers to arrest one John Birch, American missionary. Alerted to the danger, John narrowly escapes and flees to Jiangxi province, where he continues to expand his missionary work. On April 18, 1942, launched from the deck of an aircraft carrier, Colonel James Doolittle leads his famous raid on Tokyo. The pilots know they can never land their bombers on the carrier, so they simply head toward free China as far as their fuel can carry them. They bail out over enemy territory. Meanwhile, John's missionary activity has brought him once again deep into the Japanese-held sector, and the next night finds him inconspicuously seated at a small cafe in Zhejiang province. A stranger approaches and whispers, "If you are an American, please follow me." Outside, John is led to a boat that contains none other than Colonel Doolittle himself and his flight crew. They tell John that they're desperately in need of a translator and help in getting through Japanese lines. And so, with no thought of personal danger, John leads the group out of enemy territory. On the way to Langchi, he tells Colonel Doolittle of his desire now to join the American forces in China, preferably as a chaplain, but in whatever capacity he can be most useful. Sometime later, while in Guilin, and quite by coincidence, John meets General Claire Chennault of the famous Flying Tigers. The general gives him a ride to Chungking in an army transport plane. This is the beginning of a friendship that deepens through the trials of war. General Chennault later revealed that he came to regard John Birch almost as his own son. On the 4th of July, 1942, John is commissioned as second lieutenant in the United States Army Air Force. But because General Chennault already has a chaplain, and because he desperately needs old China hands who speak the language, are aware of the intricate social customs, and who can live on the meager Chinese diet, John accepts the dangerous assignment of gathering information behind enemy lines. In March of 1943, he is sent to Changsha as liaison and intelligence officer with the Chinese Army in that area. Here he trains over 100 vitally needed Chinese radio operators. Using cloth panels on the ground to pinpoint enemy targets, and personally directing the bombing runs by radio, John quickly becomes almost a legendary figure known to all as the Eyes of the 14th Air Force. From sites overlooking the Yangtze River, John and his crew are able to maintain such a surveillance that the Japanese are unable to move a single ship on the river without the Air Force knowing it. On one occasion, when Air Force pilots have repeated difficulty in finding a particular munition dump, John filters back through enemy lines to a friendly airfield, and then, riding in the nose of the lead bomber, he personally pinpoints the target for the bombardier. The dump is completely destroyed. Once again far behind enemy lines, and entirely on his own initiative, John undertakes the seemingly impossible task of building 2 emergency airfields. He is able to secure almost incredible cooperation from both Chinese soldiers and civilians, not only because of his ability to deal with them diplomatically, but also because of their profound personal respect for this missionary soldier. His sincere friendship for the Chinese and devotion to their cause is so unmistakable that literally thousands of coolies labor by the most primitive methods to build his airstrips. These valuable fields deep in enemy territory do not cost the U.S. Air Force one single penny. After 3 long years of war, young John Birch is now a man. In a moment of meditation, he writes to his parents, "I am growing in the ability to handle men in the achievement of difficult tasks. So these years of violence are not entirely wasted." Yes, the young soldier is looking toward the future, and he has amazing foresight. He writes home, "I believe that this war and the ensuing federations will set the world stage as never before for the rise of the Antichrist." In September of 1944, for exceptionally meritorious conduct in performance of outstanding service, General Claire Chennault proudly pins the Legion of Merit on Captain John Birch. The end of war did not by any means clear up the problems in China. 3 million Japanese were now virtually stranded in that vast land they had entered 8 years earlier as conquerors. The resulting chaos demanded that many difficult missions be undertaken to unscramble the confusion. Assigned to one such mission are Captain Grimes, Lieutenant Ogle, and Sergeant Myers of the United States Army, 2 Korean and 5 Chinese enlisted men, Lieutenant Tung of the Chinese Army, and Captain John Birch in command. Shortly after departure, their train is stopped by a break in the tracks of the Lunghai Railroad about 50 miles west of Suzhou. They transfer their gear to a small handcar and then press on to the east toward their destination of Tsingtao. Despite the warning that there are marauding bands of communist guerrillas ahead, the men feel that as Americans and as allies in the war against Japan, there should be nothing to fear from the communists. And besides, the war is over. Has been for 10 days. Finally, they meet up with a force of communist guerrillas several hundred strong, deliberately adding to the existing chaos by tearing down telephone wires. After negotiating with the communist guerrillas for about 20 minutes, Captain Birch finally is able to make arrangements to proceed. With great relief, the group moves on. But unknown to them, a message has been sent ahead, and the worst is yet to come. An hour later, the party meets a second communist group, apparently headquarters for the guerrilla band. Once again, they are ordered to halt. Captain Birch and Lieutenant Tung ask to speak with the man in charge. After a brief conversation, they are led into the village and then left surrounded by soldiers while the communists pretend to be trying to find their leader. Captain Grimes and the rest of the party stay behind. Lieutenant Tung overhears several of the communist soldiers and warns Captain Birch that his life may be in danger if they stay. John replies, "It doesn't make much difference what happens to me, but it is of utmost importance that my country learn now whether these people are friend or foe." Friend or foe? The answer is quick in coming. "Disarm that man!" Captain Birch demands to know by what authority an American officer is being disarmed. "Wait, if he is to be disarmed, let me do it." "No, shoot him first!" Lieutenant Tung has been shot in the leg and then bayoneted. The last thing he remembers is an order for Captain Birch to move out. But John, also hit in the leg, replies, "I cannot walk." friend or foe. As the body of John Birch lies lifeless in a ditch, the question is answered. World War III has begun. This is China, north of the Yangtze and south of the Wangho, August 29, 1945. While Americans on the other side of the world are still rejoicing over the end of World War II, the first American casualty of World War III is carried to his grave. John Birch commanded no armies, headed no government, converted no nation to his creed. But with his death and in his death, the battle lines were drawn in a struggle from which either humane civilization or godless communism must emerge, with one completely triumphant and the other completely destroyed.
The year 1945 found Americans in no mood to worry about such trifles as communism. With rationing gradually being lifted, long-awaited consumer goods began returning to the stores, and the country plunged headlong into one gigantic spending spree. Yes, with so much prosperity and leisure time, how could there possibly be any cause for worry? While we played happily at our little games, the communists were taking the world. We had fought one of the bloodiest and costliest wars of history to put a stop to the expanding tyranny of the Axis powers. But in less than 10 short years of so-called peace, communism had already conquered far more land and people than Hitler at the very zenith of his success. The marching of soldiers and the rattling of missiles frightened the free world with the specter of Soviet military might. But since 1945, not a single Russian regiment had ever been used to capture any of the nations fallen to the Red Empire. The communist technique of conquering a country from the inside had forced upon us a new kind of war. A war not of machines and soldiers, but of words and ideas. The strategic targets were no longer cities and factories, but the minds and loyalties of men. The pattern was well established. First, trained agitators who conceal their communist loyalties. Then massive demonstrations, leading eventually to violence. From violence to the pretense of civil war. With the collapse of established government, revolutionary leaders rip off their masks and openly seize control. Thus, communism liberates one more piece of the world. The brutal rule of a communist slave empire has been imposed on the average upon 7,000 human beings every hour of every day of every year since 1945. Yes, the technique of conquest from within has worked well. Back in the United States, life went on as usual. We convinced ourselves it could never happen here. Or could it? The first uneasy signs had already appeared. The testimony of former communists Elizabeth Bentley and Whittaker Chambers had led to the shocking exposure of such highly placed agents as Alger Hiss. Congressional investigating committees had compiled overwhelming evidence of communist infiltration into all phases of our national life. The Reds had moved into education, labor unions, news communications, and even government itself.
The Communist Party of the United States is a fifth column if there ever was one. It is far better organized than were the Nazis in occupied countries prior to their capitulation. They are seeking to weaken America, just as they did in their era of obstruction when they were aligned with the Nazis. Their goal is the overthrow of our government. There is no doubt as to where a real communist loyalty rests. Their allegiance is to Russia, not the United States. The communists have been, still are, and always will be a menace to freedom, to democratic ideals, to the worship of God, and to America's way of life. I feel that once public opinion is thoroughly aroused, as it is today, the fight against communism is well on its way. Victory will be assured once communists are identified and exposed, because the public will take the first steps of quarantining them so they can do no harm. Communism in reality is not a political party. It is a way of life, an evil and malignant way of life. It reveals a condition akin to disease that spreads like an epidemic. And like an epidemic, a quarantine is necessary to keep it from infecting this nation.
The warnings went unheeded, and the Reds went deeper into the woodwork. Then came Korea, and the Cold War became a ridiculous phrase. While communists were murdering Americans somewhere in the world almost every day, officials in Washington spoke in soft terms of accommodation and compromise to promote peace. A strange kind of peace with an enemy dedicated to our destruction and killing our own people. While the United States staggered in confusion and defeat in a world war it stubbornly refused to recognize, those who tried to lead a counteroffensive were isolated one by one. Men like Congressman Dyes were labeled controversial. Men like Senator Taft were ignored, and men like Senator McCarthy were destroyed. Of course, there were many others who recognized the growing internal menace of communism, but not being in public office and without a voice in our communications media, they did what they could as individual citizens. They also joined together into small groups to make their individual efforts more effective. But almost without exception, these loosely knit organizations became bogged down with indecision, committee action, and leadership struggles. Soon they broke up into still smaller splinter groups and then withered on the vine. Some were even infiltrated by communist agents posing as patriots, who then took over these groups and used them for their own purposes. But fortunately, ladies and gentlemen, fortunately for ourselves and for history, there was one man who would not accept the established pattern of defeat. After years of study and observation, Robert Welch conceived a unique formula for victory. He analyzed not only the vulnerable points of communism, but the weaknesses and mistakes of previous anti-communist efforts as well. He knew that one man could never stand alone against the cunning teamwork of an organized conspiracy. But he also knew that an organization set up along typical parliamentary lines was doomed to failure, as the record clearly had proven. So he drafted a plan for a new kind of organization. A plan which, if only put into operation quickly enough, by enough people, and with sufficient dedication, could yet turn the tide. And so, in December of 1958, the John Birch Society was born.
In the beginning, the society was just an idea in the mind of one man. But soon this man attracted to him some of the most prominent leaders in the American conservative movement. Today, these men comprise the council or the governing body of the John Birch Society. From all walks of life and from all over the United States, the council members are prominent in their respective business and professional fields. Naturally, they are keenly aware of the treacherous and deceptive tactics of communism. But they also understand the political and economic concepts upon which our American system has been built. These are men of unswerving principles. They cannot be compromised by opposition, corrupted by pragmatism, frightened by controversy, or swayed by the chanting of public opinion. Serving without compensation, and often at great cost to themselves, these men truly are a credit not only to the John Birch Society, but to their country as well.
Good evening, Marion.
Hello, Art. Good to see you.
Charlie.
Nice to have you. Don't forget to fill out the chart. Okay. Hi there, Chuck. Great to see you.
At the membership level of the John Birch Society, the working units are called chapters. Once each month, a chapter meeting is held in the home of one of the members. The relatively small size of these units enables them to avoid most of the time-consuming requirements of larger groups.
Helen, I'd like a book on the Panama Canal.
Oh, here, Hans. This is...
Oh, yes, the untold story of Panama, yes. May I check that out, please?
Surely.
Each chapter maintains a lending library of basic books which are constantly in circulation. These libraries are provided by the Society at no charge to the members as a means of encouraging them to read at least one book every month.
Here's Charlie's MM. And there's my MM.
Thanks. Excuse me, Marion. I don't think I have your remember.
Oh, yes, here it is.
There we go. Thanks.
Each member turns in a small sealed envelope containing his personal monthly message. They're gathered together and then forwarded to the home office where each one is read carefully and acknowledged. In this way, any comments, suggestions, or contributions, if any, are always confidential.
I'll only need about a minute at the end of the meeting to announce these tickets, Dora.
Fine, Bill.
Excuse me, Bill. Dora, here's the chart. It's 7:30.
Oh, we better get going. It's time to start the meeting, everyone. Please take your seats.
Go, Art.
The chapter leader is responsible for starting the meetings on time. These are all busy people, and they have not come for a social hour. A well-run chapter meeting reflects the serious nature of the Society's objectives.
Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation.
Merely being patriotic or anti-communist is not sufficient qualification for membership. The John Birch Society seeks only those of goodwill, humane conscience, and religious ideals who can set a personal example which others may follow without hesitation.
Dear Heavenly Father, once again we ask your blessing and your guidance for our efforts in the common cause which brings us together. We thank thee for the gift of freedom in this great republic, and we pray for the strength, the wisdom, and the courage in our efforts to preserve for ourselves and our children the blessings which we have inherited. Amen.
I want to congratulate the members on their excellent record of participation in the Society's programs last month.
A high degree of participation is expected from each member. As Robert Welch phrased it, we need pullers at the oars and not passengers in the boat.
It's the dedicated few, you know, who are going to win this battle for us. So I hope that next month our record of activity will be just as good as it was this month. I know you've all read the bulletin, so I won't go into it in detail, but there are one or two things that I want to emphasize. The theme of the bulletin this month is that we must stay on the offensive because it isn't possible to win a purely defensive battle. The program to impeach Earl Warren is a good example of an aggressive program which is already gaining a great deal of momentum. It's far more effective in educating people about the activities of the Supreme Court than it would be to protest the individual court decisions. Hans has been preparing a talk.
One of the cardinal principles of the John Birch Society is that victory requires taking the initiative. But to put international communism on the defensive requires the combined and organized efforts of many people all working together.
And for visual aids, I had these layout charts made. And next week, I'll have slides made from these. And if you'll contact me after the meeting, I will have them made available to you.
Now let's hear Brian's report on the impeach Earl Warren billboard.
I'm happy to make the report that the impeach Earl Warren billboard that our chapter has donated, along with 5 others, is in the process of being put up. It's on top of a building on a main street, one that will be seen by a great amount of traffic.
Thanks, Brian. That billboard will be a big help.
Concerted action, one of the reasons the communists fear the John Birch Society. It's the first time anywhere in the world that they have met truly solid, organized opposition.
Our Support Your Local Police bumper stickers have arrived for those of you who have requested them. We're happy to say these bumper stickers have been seen on automobiles in every state of the Union, and the response has just been wonderful.
Thank you, Helen. Oh, I almost forgot about Charlie. He'd never forgive me if I didn't give him a chance to tell you about the interesting FBI report he has, which ties in with our Support Your Local Police campaign. Would you give it to us now, Charlie?
The January issue of the FBI Law Enforcement Bulletin, this article by J. Edgar Hoover, revealing the dangers of politically inspired police review boards, had such general interest that I had 1,000 copies run off for use of the members for distribution in whatever way they see fit.
Individual responsibility has become a byword among members, and they practice what they preach. And so it goes, night after night, in every community across the nation. The meetings progress right on schedule.
We're happy to have Bill Rawson, our section leader, visit us tonight, and he would like to make an announcement. Bill?
I want to remind all of you.
A volunteer section leader is responsible for several chapters within the same community. He attends meetings to offer suggestions and to keep the separate groups informed of area-wide projects.
And then on the 27th of this month, the Society is sponsoring Tom Anderson. He'll be speaking at the Civic Auditorium. I want to be sure that you're there. I have some tickets here tonight. You can get them at the end of the meeting. They're going pretty fast.
Thanks, Bill. Our chapter has already made a commitment with Bill for 75 tickets to this important meeting, and I hope you will all get some and be sure to attend. Before we close, let me remind you that our next educational meeting is on the 20th, and it covers the material in the United Nations packet. This meeting is designed for those members who are interested in this subject, need a refresher course on it, and also for their guests. Now, for those who would like to stay a while, we're going to serve refreshments as usual, and for the rest who must go home early, the formal part of this meeting is adjourned.